what worries me the most, Jude, is like these next 3 games that we have all at home. We need to win really all 3 of these because in the last 10 we're
Here,
3
let me
and
go to the
7.
schedule.
It's hard to jump around on you, but
No, you're good. You're good.
in the last 10 games we're 3 and 7, and the Warriors, the Kings, the Mavericks, and the Suns are all in front of us right now. And
Uh-huh.
the Warriors are 4 and 6 in their last 10, Mavericks are 4 and 6, but the Mavericks have a lot of injuries. They just keep piling up for them. I imagine that they will eventually propel forward in the playoff picture, but the rest of those teams, they're playing well right now, especially the Sacramento
Mhm.
Kings. So if we're going to have a chance to slip into that 10-9 range, we got to start winning some of these games because we're in a real rough patch right now, which is a shame considering how a couple of our young guys are actually playing better despite the losses.
Yeah, and that's something that you guys will see in the title that we'll get into here in a second, just to give you guys the picture here, as you guys can see. And as Ethan illustrated very well, you've got the Sacramento Kings, the Golden State Warriors, the Dallas Mavericks, the Phoenix Suns, the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, think about all of those teams just right off the bat there. As much as the Spurs, and now everybody below the Spurs, I would say the Spurs are for sure better than. Like, I think there's a big gap there. But those are still a lot of teams like Luka Doncic. As much as we've been able to compete with the Kings this year, still DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis.
Oh yeah.
You've still got Steph Curry on the Golden State Warriors with Buddy Hield now coming off the bench. And as much as they had a hot start and they've kind of fallen off, I mean, that's still all of these teams have more experience than
Yeah.
us, is what I'm getting at the end of the day, on top of all the star players like KD, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just kind of wild to look at that. But even with that being said, still only 2 games out of that 10 seed, but it's definitely going to be rough for the Spurs when it comes to that. Not saying, when I say rough, I don't mean that means for sure it's not going to happen, but it's going to be a tough road. Maybe tough is a better way to put it. But really, the thing that I was getting to here, Ethan, is this just kind of goes back to a point that you made earlier in the show. At the beginning of the season, we said that the Spurs will probably be fringe playing.
Hmm.
That's about what this scenario is. They're right on the edge of maybe getting in or not.
Hmm. Which is why I think these next
Yeah.
3 games are extremely important. We got the Clippers at home, Milwaukee at home, and Miami at home. I would say 2 of those are very winnable games. One of them, it's a toss up, but why they're so important, Jude, not only the
Uh
rankings
huh.
thing like we just talked about, but then we have 6 games
Rodeo
on the
road trip.
road in a row. Correct. And the way the Spurs are playing on the road right now, I don't
Yeah.
trust, that record to be good.
Oh, crap. I clicked on the
Out perfect.
Grizzlies, but I meant to click
Happens to the best of us.
on the actual thing. I know we've done this a couple times, but what I was trying to do was pull up the Spurs road record so that we can see that, because I think you're making a very good point. Yeah, 7-12 on the road, and then let's go and see what the Spurs are exactly at home in these next 3 games. 12-10 on at home. So as much as it's still close to 500, still a big gap for the Spurs there. The Spurs definitely play much better at home, and
Mhm.
again, a Clippers team that is in the playoffs. Much significantly ahead of 500 there, 7 games ahead of 500. Um, and if we're going to beat teams like this, to your point, um, probably playing at home is going to be better for us than playing on the road, as you've said this
Mm.
season. And all of these teams are pretty solid. Obviously, Miami, out of all of the games, I think I would say is
Most
the game
winnable.
the game that, yeah, is most winnable, with all of the stuff going on with Jimmy Butler there. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for sure. They just smacked us with all of the Jimmy Butler stuff going on, 128 to
Mhm.
107. Um, just a couple of games ago before we went to Paris. But like you said, man, I couldn't agree more, because to your point, with our road record versus home, these are going to be very important games, because if this ends up being, because this could very well be a 3-game losing streak too. So
Mhm.
if that happens going into the rodeo road trip, that's going to really set the Spurs back to have a chance in this play-in race. I mean, we're talking about it. It's so crazy to think about, but now that we're winding down past the midway point of the season, this is something that we got to start thinking about, especially with the point that you made. But also, the flip side of that is going into the rodeo road trip. That could be a point
Mhm.
of, just emphasis in the locker room, and maybe we can turn it around because of how it's gone so far this season. And every year the rodeo road trip, can kind of be mentally formulated as that. And I think that's kind of how Pop and the team have tried to frame it. So
Right. Either way, we need Devin Vassell to brush off that terrible performance in game 2
yes.
against Indiana and
Uh-huh.
revert back to game 1 versus Indiana, where he was magnificent with 25 points on 9 of 13 overall shooting. Because that's the Devin that we've been praying for every single night, Jude.